Good day everyone. For today's video, we're going to create a game called Happy Garden. For this game, we're going to use Python as our programming language in creating this game. I'm Jonathan Grintosa Bertis with my fellow groupmates Cyril J. Vidalio and J.R. Nelson. So let's get right to it. So what happens in this game? So when the game starts, a cow with a watering can appears in the garden, but there is only one flower. Every few seconds, another flower appears or an existing flower begins to wilt. We use the arrow keys to move the cow to the wilted flowers and press the spacebar to water them. If any flower remains wilted for more than 10 seconds, the game ends. But if the garden is happy for more than 15 seconds, one of the flowers mutates into fang flower and tries to zap the cow. So here we have two main characters. We have the cow and the fang flower. So the cow is the main character in the game. Its aim is to keep all the flowers watered. And the fang flower, this is a large carnivorous plant, moves around the garden and tries to zap the cow. So how this game works? The code begins by setting up the actors, the cow and the flowers in the garden. It then checks if any of the flowers have been wilted for more than 10 seconds, and if the cow has been zapped by a fang flower. If any one of these conditions is true, the game ends. If not, the program checks for the other conditions. So let's now proceed to the coding. The first step here is we open the idle and create an empty file by clicking on the file menu and choosing new file. Next, we go to your Python games folder and create another folder called Happy Garden. From the file menu, we choose Save As and save the program as garden.py inside the Happy Garden folder. Next step is within the Happy Garden folder, we create another folder by right-clicking and choosing New Folder. Name it Images. It will be used to store all the images we need for this game. Next step is we find the images for Happy Garden in the Python Games resource pack and copy them into the Images folder. It's time to start coding. We go back to our garden.py file and start by importing some modules. We'll use run-in function to randomly choose which flowers will wilt or mutate. The functions in the time module will keep track of how long the garden has been happy for or how long any flowers have been wilted. So we code these following codes. From random import run-int and import time. This imports Python's time module and this imports the run-in function from Python's random module. The next step is we define the global variables. These are the variables that will be used throughout the game. These variables define the size of the game screen. These are flagged variables which let you know what's happening in the game. These variables help keep track of the time. Next step is to start with the only actor in the game is the cow. We type this code to the add the cow and set its starting position. This value is set the cow's starting position on the screen. Next step is we create a list for other actors. So the other actors in the game is the flowers and the fang flowers. These two characters are generated at random as the game progresses. Since we don't know how many of them will be generated, we create a list to store each one that appears. Each time a new flower actor is created, it gets added to this list. This list will store how long a flower has been wilted. This list will store the fang flower actors. The next step is we keep track of the fang flowers. In this game, we need to pay special attention to the zapping fang flowers. We'll need to make them move around the garden. They also need to bounce off the edges of the game window so that they are always on the screen. We can do this by keeping track of their velocity, the speed at which something moves in a particular direction along the x-axis and the y-axis. This will hold the velocities of the fang flowers along the y-axis. This will hold the velocities of the fang flowers along the x-axis. The next step here is that now that we set up those variables, we need to draw the garden and the cow. There are no flowers or fang flowers to draw yet, but add the code that will draw them when they're generated. This code draws the cow on the screen. This code will draw all the flowers. This will draw all the fang flowers. And this code checks how long the game has been running for.
Add some code that lets the player know that the game is over if the flowers have been wilted for too long. Add an else branch to the if not game over statement in the draw function you defined. Add a flower. In this step, you will create a flower actor for the cow to water and add it to the end of flower list. You will also add the value happy to the end of wilted list, which holds the amount of time each flower has been wilted for. The happy value will let the program know that the flower hasn't wilted. These are the global variables this function uses. This line creates a new flower actor. This line sets the position of the new flower. And this adds the new flower to the list of flowers. This lets the program know that the flower is not wilted. Add more flowers to the garden. You need to add some code that will create a new flower every 4 seconds to keep the cow busy. This line calls the new flower function to create a new flower. And this line adds a new flower every 4 seconds. You need to check if any of the flowers have been wilted for more than 10 seconds. If one has, the garden is unhappy and it's game over. This checks if there are any items in the wilted list. This code loops over each item in the wilted list. These lines check if the flower is wilted and work out how long it's been wilted. And this line of codes checks if the flower has been wilted for more than 10 seconds. It's time to give your gartending cow a bit of a challenge. Add some code that will wilt a random flower every 3 seconds. The cow will have to dash to the wilted flower to water it. This line generates a random index in the list of flowers. This checks if the flower at this index is wilted or not. This sets the flower image to a wilted flower image. And this line resets the time for this flower in wilted list to the current time. And this line schedules another call to wilt flower function in 3 seconds. You need the code to check if the cow is near a flower when the spacebar is pressed. If it is, the flower will get watered and its time since flower wilted value in wilted list will be set to happy. To do this, you will use Pygame0's built-in collideRect function to check if flower and the cow have collided or are next to each other. These are the global variables you will use in this function. This variable helps the program to move through the list in order. This code loops through all the flowers in the list. This condition applies if the cow is next to the flower you're looking at. This changes the wilted flower's image back to the original version. This line stops the program counting how long the flower's been wilted. And this break keyword stops the loop from checking the other flowers. This line updates the value of index so that the program moves through the list. Now that your fang flowers are in motion, you need to add some code that will check if a fang flower has caught up with the cow to zap it. These are the global variables used in this function. This checks if the fang flower and cow are next to each other. This line of codes adds an image to show the cow has been zapped. This tells the program that the game is over, and this line stops the program from checking other fang flowers. Unlike other flowers, the fang flowers don't stay in one place. They move all over the garden trying to zap the cow. In this step, you will add the code that generates the velocity of each fang flower along the x-axis and y-axis. The flowers will use a combination of these two velocities to move up, down, side to side, or diagonally. This line generates a number that represents the direction of the flower. This generates the velocity of the flower with no direction yet. In this line of codes, if the direction is 0, this returns a negative velocity. If the direction is 1, this returns a positive velocity. It's time for your harmless flowers to turn into carnivorous flowers. Even worse, the code will change a one random flower into a flower every 20 seconds after the first mutation. These are the global variables needed in this function. If the game is not over and there are still flowers left to mutate, this block of code will run. This line picks a random flower to mutate. This line removes the mutated flower from the list of flowers. This line sets the flower at the same position as the flower it mutated from. This line of code sets how fast the flower is moving left or right on the screen. This sets how fast the flower is moving up or down on the screen. This adds a new flower to the list of flowers. And these lines of code's flower's velocity are added to this list. This line schedules a call to mutate a flower every 20 seconds. It's time for the flowers to start moving. The code in this step will be called every time the update function runs. It will also keep the flowers inside the garden by making them bounce off the edges of the game screen. These are the global variables used in this function. This variable helps the program keep track of which item in the list it's dealing with. This loops over all the flowers in the list. This gets the x and y velocities of the flower. This gets the new position of the flower. And if the flower touches the left edge of the screen, this will make it start moving to the right. By changing its y velocity, the flower is brought back into the screen.
Now, let's add the code that will change the image of the cow using the watering can back to the version where it's just holding it. So this code runs if the game is not over yet. This line code changes cow's image back to the original one. So now let's add some code that lets you move the cow around. Now, you need to add a call to the check_wilt_times function. Now the flowers are ready to attack. The last thing you need to do is add some code that starts the whole mutation process if the garden has been happy for more than 15 seconds. So this line of code checks if the garden has been happy for more than 15 seconds and if any flowers have appeared on the screen yet, while this line mutates a flower into a flower. That's it. Now you can test and run your code. Enjoy!